Welcome, everybody, back to Segal Talks here at the Martin E. Segal Theater Center, the Graduate Center, CUNY in Manhattan, in New York City, at the City University. Another day on planet Earth. The sun shines outside, but still the reality is stranger than fiction. We live in a catastrophe movie here, especially in the US, where the situation is so dramatically different than what we just heard from our friends and colleagues from France or from Germany. Susanna Kennedy said that she feels it's almost over. But here, over 40 states seeing rising numbers. Florida had the highest number of cases of death ever. And school systems are closing down for the entire fall, the Los Angeles school system. And also my university, I think, will cough completely online teaching as of course, with the possibility to do hybrid courses. We are all very happy that our international students can stay. It looked like they would be banned to enter the country, a shocking proposal and reckless from the Trump administration. And we hope things will look better soon. There are so many efforts by scientists around the world to find a cure, and there are important news about the vaccination, but we hope it will be found. Never in the history of mankind so many scientists have worked together. And as we hear, the Russian hackers are trying to get into every lab. It was just the big news today and around the world to get the information. So it is really like an incredible catastrophe movie which we are looking at. And the voices of artists, we feel strongly at the Segal Theater, and we have always thought about this, but now it becomes even clearer. The voices of artists are of significance now more than ever. Artists have been on the right side of social justice, the right side on that complex struggle for freedom and liberties over centuries. And what they think, what they anticipate, how they feel the present is most significant. And we need to listen to them more, as we need to listen to scientists and our climate researchers. But artists do know what we do need and what is missing, and they are right in what they say. So this is why we continue our work to listen around the world. We are now on week 15 or 16, incredible. We didn't know it would be so long when we started. 5 days a week, we do new programming. As far as we know, we're the only theater institution in the US or even in Europe have no programming every day connected to that. It's a small center where we are. And today we have another artist with us who deserves our attention, who is a significant force in the field, whose work is emerging. And it's Tiago Rodrigues, so from Portugal. Tiago, thank you for joining us. So many told me you should have him on, and he hasn't been in the US in the bigger cities, but even so, as he said, he was in Seattle and Cincinnati, which is great news that this decentralized structure seems to be working. And Tiago started out as an actor, early on created his own company as a student, TG Stan, and then moved on to create a new ensemble, Mundo Perfeito, if I understand it right, in Belgium. And he created a body of work that is stunning. Works he created are the ones most known as By Heart. He teaches audience members Shakespeare sonnet on life. It's about memory and history. Antony and Cleopatra, Bovary, The Way She Dies, if I understand right, it's about Anna Karenina, a famous play that got a lot of attention. Sopro, about the idea of the prompter, a woman who has to negotiate. It's 4 actors and words and memory and many others. He is mixing true, real stories in quotation marks and fiction. He is writing for and with actors, which is interesting. And his idea is a poetic transformation of reality through theater. He got a very big and significant award in 2018, not long ago, the European Prize for Theatrical Realities, a very significant one, the 15th, I think. He's the director of the Teatro Nacional de Maria in Lisbon in Portugal since 2015. And he also teaches, I think, in Ana Teresa de Kersmacher School, for example, which he runs as a dancer. So he is an educator also and a teacher. So Tiago, I hope you forgive my long introduction. It is all about listening here, but we have to give a little bit of context. So first of all, really, I know how busy you are, and that taking the time for us it means the world to us. Where are you now, and what time is it?
Well, I'm in Lisbon. I'm home right now. Normally, I should be at the National Theatre, but we had a turmoil this week. We reopened the theater late in June, the 20th of June. We reopened the theater after 3.5 months of closure because of the pandemic. And we've been performing in the theater, but also open air in the city, in other cities. So we sort of put all our energy in following all the security guidelines and limited amounts of audience and social distance and masks and all the rules. But we wanted to, as soon as possible, get back to the physical contact with the audience. Unfortunately, after we did the last of our shows, this sort of short summer season, after the last one, we had a case of COVID identified in our team of the National Theatre. So last Monday we had to, shut down all rehearsals, shut down all works in the building, and everybody's been home until this morning. So we had a lot of people suspected of COVID. Everybody's been tested, and fortunately, this one case is an isolated case, and the other 150 people that work at the National Theatre are now negative and are being followed. And so I just got the news a short while ago. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Lisbon. I just knew about it before we started our conversation, so I didn't have time to go back to the theater. But tomorrow morning I'll be back to the theater along with most of the team, and sort of facing this new set of rules of the game, of working of working that everybody's dealing with, this sort of common danger. But also in Portugal, I heard you describing at the beginning what's going on in the United States, and we are of course watching, following the situation from Portugal with a lot of concern, because we feel that it's really a catastrophe, and we're very concerned with the American people and with everyone living in the United States, and also with what seems to be a sort of clash of interests between the safety of the people and other less significant and valuable interests. So we watch also the political turmoil around the pandemic in the United States with a lot of concern. The same with Brazil. We're very concerned with Brazil. I have been in Brazil. I was in Brazil in March when the pandemic started, and we rushed back to Portugal because most theaters were already closing in São Paulo, and we also watched with a lot of concern and worry, not only at the human level because of the safety of the people, but also the political evolution that we see concerning the pandemics in the position of the administrations of the countries. Here in Portugal, the situation was very under control for a long while. We were a sort of southern miracle in Europe, and now not so much. So now what we have is a very controlled situation in most of the country, but not in Lisbon. And that's due in a way to the fact that after the confinement, getting back to work in Lisbon, you have the most amount of people, you have the most density of people, but also you have the most people having to commute, going from the suburbs to the center of the city and using public transportation and having absolutely to work for their survival. And then of course you watch that the labor conditions and the habitation conditions and working conditions of these people allow for contamination. So in Lisbon, we are not so confident and safe anymore. I think there is a big effort to avoid going back to confinement, but the numbers, specifically in Lisbon, are not very positive for the moment. The rest of the country is quite under control and quite safe. So we're dealing with that situation now, but very eager to to be able to go back to rehearsals, go back to preparing the next season. We will open the season the 2nd of September on the National Theatre. So we have sort of 1.5 months of preparation until we reopen our doors and we work daily with the presence of the audience. So well, hopefully things will get back better in the next 6 weeks, and we will be in a sort of kinder context.
Incredible. So what were you doing in Brazil? I think Milo Rao also happened to be in Brazil with his project.
Milo, he was researching in the Amazon.
Yeah.
I was taking part at the same time, more or less, but it's a big distance. When we say Brazil, it's a bit like saying the States. Yeah, we were both in the States at the same time. And then you realize someone was in Florida and the other one in Nebraska. So
what were you doing? Would you remember what happened? How did you hear the news? And
yeah, I was taking part in a beautiful festival in São Paulo, Meet. It's one of the most adventurous, interesting, and diverse performing arts festivals in Brazil. It's spelled MIT, Meet São Paulo, and it had a beautiful international programmation. And I was fortunate enough to be for this edition the focus artist. So I was performing more than one piece. I was performing By Heart, which is the solo you mentioned, where I share the stage with 10 audience members that choose themselves to come on stage to learn a text by heart during the performance. A Shakespeare sonnet, Sonnet 30, went to the sessions of sweet silent thoughts. I summon up remembrance of things past. And I was also performing Sopro, which would be performed for the first time in Brazil. I still performed the first 3 performances of the first 3 showings of By Heart, but Sopro we never managed to show it because the problem started to happen also in São Paulo. Theaters started to close, and in the meanwhile we were from the other side of the Atlantic in contact with Lisbon, because we were about to be forced to close the National Theatre also in Lisbon. So this was mid-March, and we ended up not doing all the shows we want to do in Brazil, and coming back to Lisbon and facing the fact that we had closed already the National Theatre, and we were at that point still unaware of the huge dimension of this phenomena, of this pandemics, and how it would affect us all. We were hoping that it would be, well, a couple of weeks and things will be sort of solved, and quickly we understood that was not the case, and that we were facing a sort of long-term phenomena that would have a deeper impact in our lives.
Mm-hmm. So then you went right away in confinement, and how long was it? And how did you experience it? What did it mean to you?
Well, in Portugal, we half March we entered immediately in state of emergency, and that meant that the right of circulation was suppressed for health reasons. It meant that people should stay home and only leave home for absolutely essential tasks. So that was a halt in the economy, in the work of people, and it was very violent for the cultural sector. We don't have like in many other countries, I think also like in the States, contrary to Germany or France, we don't have a very developed social security plan for artists or culture or arts professionals and workers. So we knew that social security would not work in favor of artists that could not work, so they were not getting paid, and they would not get any any support or very little support from the state. So our first decision when we closed the theater was to keep on paying everyone, not only our team, the fixed contracted hired team of the National Theatre, but all independent artists, all independent technicians and companies with whom we work. We decided that as long as we would be closed, we would pay full 100% everyone, as if work was being presented to the audience. So that was a big strain in our budgets, and at the same time it was a sort of political decision of assuming that the impact of this crisis should be collective and not individual, that people should not feel the impact of this crisis at dinner table. It should be the National Theatre feeling this collective impact, because we're a collective, we're a democracy, and we're a society. So as long as we can, we should, take care of each other. So I think the first reaction to the pandemics, because I had to deal as a director of the National Theatre with this issue, with a very fragile, precarious economical sector in the arts in Portugal, and the place of responsibility of a national theatre was immoderate amounts of solidarity. Was to say that the first answer we should give as citizens, but also as human beings and artists to this pandemic should be immoderate amounts of solidarity. When I say moderate amounts, is because we live in systems, in societies that are pretty much ruled by market rules, and they tell us that solidarity is okay, but moderate solidarity, like within the boundaries of reason. And I thought immediately, and I was followed by the whole team of the National Theatre, that in such a new crisis, we should answer with the unreasonable amounts of solidarity and go as far as we could and beyond. So that was the first thing, and that really affected me, because the first weeks of stated emergency and confinement, I spent on Zoom meetings and phone calls with artists, with technicians, with partners, with other theaters, finding solutions to all the shows we had to cancel, to all the tours we had to cancel, all the rehearsals we had to cancel. And the answer was always immoderate amounts of solidarity. That's how to deal with it. How can we do it? Just be, very cooperative and very generous and very and as fair as you can, and that was very beautiful to live like that. So the fact that I was in a place of, let's say, political, in the broader sense of the word, responsibility for others, and especially for artists and the artistic theatrical landscape, forced me to react to the pandemics with some values, with some philosophical stands, and this was solidarity. And that really gave me hope during the first weeks as an individual, because of course, when you do that, you feel that solidarity is also contagious. So you feel that other theaters started to react upon that and say, yeah, if you do that, I'm going to do it also. And I will use the National Theatre as an example so that we also do the same. And artists started to demand the same amounts of solidarity from other institutions, from the state itself. And that was very positive for a long while, until another issue of the pandemics, which was, I felt very strongly, which was the way that the ability of imagining tomorrow or the future was stolen from us. This sort of huge piano that fell in our heads saying, tomorrow doesn't belong to you. You can't put things in an agenda and really believe they're going to happen. And how that had also an artistic impact. I should say that I spent many hours every day working as an artistic director, dealing with calendars, budgets, ideas of other people's performances and projects. But I had myself to write, because I could not rehearse the piece I should be rehearsing. So I said to myself, well, if you can't rehearse and meet the people, at least you should write. And I must confess that for 2 months, I wasn't able to write one line of dialogue for a play. I was able to write articles on the pandemics, articles on cultural policy, to debate a lot, but really write a line for an actor to say on stage was not possible for me. And then one day, already in April, 2 months later, I was talking with this amazing poet from Portugal, Ana Luisa Amaral, from the city of Oporto. And we were talking on the phone, and I was sort of complaining a bit, like, oh, this is awful. I can't write. I'm working like hell, but there's nothing juicy, really creative coming out of this. It's just anguish. And she said, like, well, me too. It's been 2 months. I'm closed at home. You should say I would have written, like, you know, an epic poem already, and I haven't written one single line of a poem. And then she reminded me of this beautiful quote of Wordsworth, the romantic poet, English poet, who said that poetry, well, this won't be correct, this quote, but it will be close. Poetry is what we remember. It's the strong emotions we remember in quiet times. So this idea that poetry, of course, is fed by the big events of our life, of our collective history, but it will only emerge in the quiet times when we reflect upon you don't write the poem in the roller coaster. You write a poem later that day when your balance is back in place and you're not screaming anymore. And she said, like, now we're screaming. We have no tranquility, no quietness for the poem to emerge. So, live this as good as you can, and then start doing theater, not forgetting what happened to you during this period.
That's quite significant. So poetry is to remember in the quiet time.
Yeah. One thing that happened, and at the beginning, I was always talking about, budget and calendar. We just wanted to save everyone, put everyone on the raft, and get through the storm. And after a while, I started thinking, but what about the artistic substance of what we're living? And I started asking, a company who was going to stage Top Girls by Carol Churchill, or another company who's going to stage Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, or another company who's going to stage, I don't know the title in English, Praça dos Heróis, the Thomas Bernhard's, the Square of Heroes by Thomas Bernhard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I started asking them, well, now that this is happening, you had this idea back in January or even in 19, but now that this is happening, do you still want to do these shows later this year or in the beginning of 21? And every single artist and company I was working with, Portuguese, French, German, Swiss, they all said the same thing. Of course I do. I will just do it differently. And I find this very beautiful. I had to think of, the Indian writer Arundhati Roy. She says that we always go back to the great stories, the myths. We don't go back for them to be different because we know them already, like in the Greek tragedy, but we go back to see what details have changed, because it's in the details that your time and your singularity and your vision might be expressed. It's not the fact that Antigone dies or doesn't at the end of Sophocles' tragedy that will be the sign of our times. The zeitgeist won't be in saving Antigone. It will be in how does she die this time around. And I had to think of that all these artists wanted to, even people who were writing new texts or who were not working with text, with devised theater, but they all wanted to keep their concepts. They just assured me that the storytelling would be different, details would be different. And this I found very, very inspiring. I think that these pandemics didn't change the world. What's happening is that it might allow us, through all the suffering, which is, catastrophic, but it might allow us to look at it differently and thus talk about it differently. And I had this sort of reassurance from artists when they say, well, I still want to do Carol Churchill. I think it's still relevant. I will just tell the story differently now.
So do you feel something in you changed in this time, or is it reinforcing what you think about theater, live poetry?
We have a great Portuguese poet, José Tolentino Mendonça, who is also, he's a cardinal also, and he's the archivist of the Library of the Vatican. He's an amazing figure. And José Tolentino Mendonça, during the height of the confinement in Portugal, he wrote that the pandemic, the virus, raises the veil. It allows us to look with more clarity at problems. So the virus didn't create inequality, but it allows us to look at it more clearly, to shed light upon inequality. But it also allows us to shed light upon collective hope, and the ability to cooperate, for instance. But whatever we find through the virus is not new, it's just enhanced by the urgency or the despair or the hope of our times, and the fact that the virus does this kind of tabula rasa that unites us all in for better or for worse, like in marriages. So in a way, there's this sense of community that I feel now, for instance, with the American people. When I see the news or I read the news, there's this sense of shared suffering. I know exactly what people are going through, because we're all going through the same thing. And I think this will allow us, we're combative enough to find new tools for a more just society. It will also allow, it will pave the way for an even more savage capitalism and more exploitation of people. But I think it will also allow for a more clear vision of the inequalities in our society. And I think that's one of the consequences, the raising this sort of veil that sometimes allowed us to look the other way from injustice. So when I think that's the main thing in this phenomena. It's Bruno Latour, the French thinker. He also talked about a general rehearsal. I find this very beautiful that he says this, because it's a very theatrical approach to looking at the pandemic. This is a general rehearsal of the performances yet to come, provoked by climate change. Of course, this is not immediately connected, but there's this idea that it is a global catastrophe, and this is preparing us, maybe giving us this one shot in this rehearsal to learn the lessons we need for the opening of the show, when we will face more of these phenomena provoked by climate change, which are unfortunately appear to be inevitable. So this idea of raising the veil or general rehearsal, for me, they talk a lot about past and future. Raising the veil, for me, it's about saying problems that were already there, but through the pandemics, we look at them anew, and general rehearsal, because it's this sort of global mutation. It's this feeling that for the first time, at least in our generations, for those who are alive, because no doubt that similar global problems have happened already in the past, but not in a past where we had the ability to talk on Zoom between New York and Lisbon for free. I'm not even paying to talk with you, Frank. It's amazing. So we never had a pandemic, a global pandemic in this time when this is possible, this sort of communication. So for sure, this pandemic is very different from the Spanish flu or from the plague in the 17th century, or it's very new, and at the same time it's inaugurating a historical era of global catastrophe. Now I look very, very pessimistic, but in a way, it's what Bruno Latour is pointing to and telling us also that this will allow or give us the chance to make simple yet radical changes in our lifestyles, in our collective organizations, in our institutions, because a general rehearsal is like a lesson we can learn before the opening.
Mm. Yeah, and maybe that is when you start a rehearsal, when will it end? How will it at the end look like? But you try your best, but it's a serious, most serious matter. And Latour's idea also that the virus is an actor, right? And that interacts with that we are no longer at the center of the ecosphere, that we are part of it and we are refusing to understand it. And that this is a big lesson, that it's now all of a sudden almost like in theater, like an ensemble play. It's no longer the star actors, it's no longer the written forms, it's something that is created together.
Yeah, it's you know, I must say that sometimes when I hear myself talking about this, I think sometimes people might misunderstand me and say, well, once again, here's a guy saying that this catastrophe might be an opportunity. Well, I'm totally allergic to this sort of, you know, neoliberal speech of crisis as an opportunity. We have lived in austerity in Portugal for almost a decade, with heavy problems, economical problems, but also with a very harsh policy towards social issues, and that changed politically, fortunately, in the last 5 years. And I must say I'm happy it did, in the sense that the idea that, you know, this sort of neoliberal mantra of crisis as an opportunity, it always sounds to me as you know, as an excuse for the states not to protect citizens, and it opens the door for me for this sort of entrepreneur capitalistic behavior that many times is, you know, supported or illustrated with this lie of the American dream, that I think is sort of perpetuating inequality and injustice and exploitation. On the other hand, I always have, you know, there's this very interesting story that Slovene philosopher Slavoj Žižek, he quotes Žižek in one of his books, in a book called Violence. At a certain point, he likes anecdotes a lot, Žižek, and he tells this little story, which is during the how was it called this time? I don't remember anymore. The time when you know, this in the 20s, when drinking or selling prohibition times. Yeah, in the United States during the prohibition in the 20s, there's this anecdote about a journalist that asks a politician about supporting or not the prohibition, and the politician is always trying to evade the answer. And at a certain point, the journalist says, please tell me, do you support or not the prohibition, for instance, of wine, of selling wine? And then the politician answers this beautiful, legendary answer, which is, if you're talking about the wine that destroys marriages, turns men into animals, and vicious beings that you know, hit each other and steal and go against any civil rule, I'm of course in favor of the prohibition. But if you're talking about the wine that makes every dinner a marvelous experience and that has an amazing taste and reminds us that life is a sort of a trip of pleasure, then I'm totally against prohibition. And that's when people talk about the opportunity in the crisis, that's a bit where I stand. If you're talking about the opportunity that will keep on, you know, perpetuating inequality, of course, I'm against the opportunity. If you're talking about the crisis as this historical event that reveals or underlines important issues and might push us into different ways of living together in a more just society, then yeah, let's go for the opportunity.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how will the theater react and how should it react. I mean, you also found answers in very complex dramaturgy, complex texts and writing, like in your Antony and Cleopatra way, and the simplicity and the beauty of the staging. But also part of your work, I think you talked about burning the flag or that Wiener Festwochen project, Katharina and the beauty of killing fascists, you know, which is a very, very clear political play. Maybe talk a little bit. How do you? What is that? Politics and what do we need?
Well, I think it's. I mean, I can only talk for myself.
Yeah, please.
As a spectator or as an artist, I'm very doubtful of any dogmas on these issues in the arts. I can't avoid the political views I have, or let's even say political questions, because I have more questions than views when it comes to politics. But I can't avoid that they're somehow present in my work in different degrees, sometimes in a very invisible, you know, second, third level of understanding of a play, and sometimes more explicitly. But they're always somehow present. But the same thing with poetry. I cannot do a play, for instance, I was never able to do a real documentary theater piece, even when I thought of doing one, because halfway I always felt it was way too dry, in the sense that it missed manipulation and fiction and playfulness. And you know, for a couple of years I worked as a journalist, and the reason I abandoned journalism, besides the fact that I was not great at it, was you know, the tendency to being objective, which is never the case. I realized later I could have stayed in journalism. They're never objective, but back then I thought that was one of the aims of journalism, and I didn't want that for my life. I wanted to be tremendously subjective, so I started, you know, choosing more theater over journalism. But I still use a lot of tools of journalism when I'm preparing or doing a piece. I research like a journalist. I you know, I have my sources. I meet with people. I try to learn about issues and make casts learn about issues they didn't know. We have lessons together, and you know, we approach creating a piece as a small degree on a certain subject or several subjects. And but then I need the, you know, the subjective, mysterious approach that art allows better than other, you know, human activities. This percentage of mystery that you can never really explain in a piece, I'm very seduced by it and being part of that. This being said, I think, like in current times, one of the things that is really, you know, passioning for me in coming back to theater after a few months without being able to really rehearse or present performances, is that I also think, but this is very, very, very personal. I don't want to extend this to any other artist, but I think that the audiences might need complexity right now, and might need ambiguous approaches to things or codes. I think for a few months, but it feels almost like years already. We were hit with, you know, black and white numbers, very concrete numbers, unable to know what tomorrow would look like. And tomorrow again was translated in numbers of victims, of infected people, of recoveries, of potential cases, and everything became so concrete and so plain, so dry, that I think people are desperate for ambiguity and complexity and codes. So in that sense, I think that's one of the things I want to develop the most in theater right now, is ambiguity, complexity. So even in a play like the one we're rehearsing now, Catarina and the Beauty of Killing Fascists, that seems to have a very explicit title, we're looking for dilemmas to offer the audience, for difficult topics and difficult choices for the audience to face, and not necessarily a pamphlet or a manifesto or a political standpoint that has to be like propelled in an evangelic way. Not at all. We're dealing with very hard questions. We're asking questions about they're old questions, but I think we have to ask them today anew. Questions like, how should a tolerant democracy deal with intolerance? Should we be intolerant towards intolerance, thus preserving democracy, or should we be consequent and be tolerant even with those who will ultimately corrupt democracy and destroy it from within, because them being intolerant, they have the open highway to the power. So these are questions that people like from Malcolm X to Rousseau to I don't know, to so many people, Hannah Arendt asked. I think it's questions we should ask again when we're facing the raise to power, or even the being in power of extreme radical extreme right-wing radical populist movements. I will not go as far as to call them fascists in a debate, because then I will be quoted as an objective statement, but I can call them fascist in a play, because then it will be ambiguous and subjective and maybe wrong, but still interesting to debate. So,
what is interesting is that if I understand right, the story is a family that since generation has killed fascists, and the young daughter now has to do her first killing, and so it's basically making her high school diploma, and she has problems with it. She has moral, ethical questions, and the idea, as you said, that is things are not black and white. Actually, the people who tell you things are right or wrong, black and white, they are lying. And I think the idea, in a way, to say we have to show complexity, helps us to understand and deal with a world that is complex, full of contradictions. I think Brecht said, small-minded people, their hallmark is they are not able to think or live in a contradiction. It has to be this or this, but it's not how life is. So, but how did you combine this kind of fictional story of the family that has that proud tradition of killing fascists and a real case? So what is, maybe tell a bit of this unique thing that you take existing stories like Bovary, Anna Karenina, or Antony Cleopatra, and now this. How do you work? What is your dramaturgical idea?
Yeah, well, I think I'm very attached to the social gathering in theater. So actually, things pretty much come out of conversations with actors, with light designers, with set designers, and I have the privilege of being surrounded by these people in my daily life. So from these conversations, projects and ideas start to arise, and then I don't have like a method, but I always work in collaboration, which means that for each performance, I try to plan a way of building the performance that is, customized for that constellation of people. If I have these 3 actors, which I know already, and this 4th actor, which I don't know yet, but I sort of remember him from these plays, and we have this thing together, and this light designer, then we're going to work in a certain way. I'll give you an example, like Antony and Cleopatra. I wanted to work with Vitor Rodrigues and Sofia Diaz. They're a couple of choreographers and dancers in Portugal who do their own work as authors, and they're amazing. I'm a big fan of their work, and it had been a long time. We had this sort of flirt, this artistic flirt of we should do something together one day. And I had a sort of carte blanche from a cultural center in Lisbon, who said like, come here, do a play, whatever you want. And we had a little budget, and I said to Vitor and Sofia, I would like to do the play with you. And they said, yeah, we would love to do the play with you, but we don't want it to be authors. We want to do a Tiago Rodrigues theater play. We want to perform in one of your plays. And I said like, okay, great. So you want to do theater, and I want to work with you. What shall we do? And I just, you know, Vitor and Sofia, they're an artistic couple, but they're also a couple in real life. So we were having a coffee nearby my house, and I was telling them about, you know, artistic couples. And I thought of one of the artistic couples I really loved because it was like high pressure. It's Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. Also because they had amazing artistic results from that, you know, from that love couple. And I was telling them about Antony and Cleopatra, about Mankiewicz film, the Cleopatra, and how it almost bankrupt or did bankrupt 20th Century Fox. And you know, we were just talking about these couples. And then I said Antony and Cleopatra is actually my favorite Shakespeare tragedy because it's such a strange, crazy play. It's so difficult. It has 40 characters. It's a tragedy, but it takes 3 years to happen. And there's Alexandria and Rome, and you know, and he has this writing which is very filmic, which I adore because it's the first time that Shakespeare writes scenes that happen at the same time in different places. So there's a scene happening in Alexandria which should happen at the same time as a scene in Rome, and this sort of thinking in narrative really baffles me. And they said, okay, let's read the piece. And they read the piece, but very clearly it's an extremely theatrical piece for two dance performers, even if they're great with texts, to handle. I mean, it really asks for trained classical actors if you want to do the Shakespeare tragedy. And but what I like about them is that they're really about music and sort of mathematics of language on stage. They're very playful with repetition of words in their own work. They're about, you know, building games out of words. They take 4 words and they do a song with a choreography, and it's always very playful and joyful. And then I thought, okay, now that we read the Shakespeare tragedy, let's meet tomorrow. And tomorrow you're going to tell me everything you remember from the reading of today. And then when they told me what they remembered, they would do instinctively what they do on stage, which was like intertwine their thoughts and trying to remember together. And I said like, okay, we have a piece. It's so I'm going to try to write a text that it's a theater text that I would only write for you, for your kind of speech on stage, with a lot of repetition, like a mantra of memory of the story of Antony and Cleopatra. And because you're a couple, let's try to have Antony and Cleopatra telling the story of the whole thing, as if they can see all the characters, but the other characters aren't there, as if they're remembering themselves. And then we started little by little to sort of develop a language for this piece, a way of writing, a way of performing, a decor, a way of moving on stage that could only be possible for these two guys. I would never write Antony and Cleopatra that way if I would be left alone in my cabinet like Henrik Ibsen, imagining the whole play with all its details all alone. I actually, whenever I try to write something alone, it's really boring. It's like a school play, very, very badly written. I'm not able to write something that I really appreciate unless I'm in the studio and working with actors. So that's how the poetry, let's say the grammar of the stage discourse is developed. And many times there are previous documents. They might be fictional documents like novels that are being adapted, or real events. In the case of Bovary, for instance, while I was researching to do an adaptation of the novel of Flaubert, I found the notes, like the transcriptions of the trial of Flaubert when he first published the novel in a magazine in chapters. He was accused of immorality and attempts or attacks to the religion and the good morals, etc. So he was being trialed, and the trial was amazing. The trial was for 4 days. You had 2 lawyers that would read from the book and then comment. Like, directors would comment their own film in the extras. So they would just go like blah, 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 Flaubert, Flaubert, Flaubert. Now, what does he mean about this? He thinks that he will convince us that he juxtaposes, the hate of the state and adultery, thus saying that adultery is revolutionary, blah, blah, blah. And then the defense would say the same thing. And historically, this happened. It was lawyers reading a novel out loud and then trying to interpret. And I thought like, wow, this is a very theatrical thing. It's like they're actors, but they're outspoken about the subtext of the way they're reading. And then I thought, okay, I'm not gonna adapt the novel, I'm adapting the trial, because within the trial, we have the reading of the novel, and then we can have scenes of the novel emerging, but actually the whole context is the trial. So in that case, the trial, the historical event is the frame within which the novel, the fiction emerges. And another example is Sopro, which you mentioned before.
Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, Sopro was, well, I met Cristina Vidal 10 years ago when I first worked as an invited artist at the National Theatre in Lisbon. It was far from any of my dreams that I would once be the director of that theatre. And when I was rehearsing there a play for the small venue upstairs for the studio, sometimes I would peek into the big venue where the company of the National Theatre was rehearsing. And it was the first time I saw a prompter working. I had heard about prompters, and I knew there was still a couple of them working at the National Theatre, but I knew it was an almost extinct job in theatre. So for me, it was a bit like watching a living fossil or a dinosaur crossing the street. It was like, wow. So I watched this rehearsal secretly, and instead of looking at the actors, I could only look at Cristina, the prompt that would whisper the text, move very quietly behind the actors to whisper without bothering, following everything, taking notes in her script. And I was really seduced by it, and I introduced myself to her that day. And later in that day, I told her I would like to write a play for her, and she really dismissed me with a very paternalistic laughter and saying like, it's crazy. I will never do that. You're just crazy. You just met me. And so we met several times after that. And every time I would say as a joke, one day I will convince you to go on stage. And then in 2015, I was invited to run the National Theatre. So the first time I crossed Cristina in the halls, I said like, now I'm your director. You will have to accept to do a play on stage. And she said like, well, you might as well fire me because I will never do it. And then we started working together. She would be prompting in my pieces, in the pieces I did at the National Theatre. And I really then realized the richness of this job. It's not only about whispering the text when an actor forgets. It's about knowing the rhythm of each actor, helping them to memorize, giving them cues, taking notes of all their movements. So it's a sort of living archive of each performance. It's like a secretary, an advocate of the author of the text, but also a confidant of all the actors. It's a very important human social presence in a theater group, and it's also a very old job that feels like anachronic, and at the same time it's the sort of craftsmanship that we have to preserve, because there's this sort of knowledge, the good tradition kept in these jobs, this transmission that can only happen with human contacts, that we cannot lose. We can't do it through, through the academics or readings or visiting a museum. It's not that sort of knowledge. Someone has to share it, live it, to be able to keep on transmitting. So I was very seduced by her. And when the Festival d'Avignon invited me to do a creation for the festival, I thought, well, this is, if she's not gonna accept to premiere in front of an audience after 40 years of theater in the backstage, in the shadows, if she's not gonna accept to be under the lights for the first time at the Festival d'Avignon, I will never be able to convince her again. And after a few hours, I was able to convince her. And then we created a show, actually, where we tell the stories of a prompter, which are also the stories of a theatrical building, an old theater, very inspired by the National Theatre, like this fictional prompter is very inspired by the real prompter, which is Cristina. So she's on stage and she's prompting the whole text of the play, which is her personal stories, but she needs actors to tell her story, because that's the convention. She cannot ever address the audience directly. So she will whisper to actors all these different stories of her past, and these stories are real stories from the backstage of theater, but they're messed up with fictional stories. So you have the story of an actor that suddenly we don't know anymore if this actor is a real person or Vershinin from the Three Sisters by Chekhov, because the stories are mixed, because of course in the memory of a prompter, the real stories are always mixed with the fiction, with theater. And it's sort of this ghostly visits to the past of a prompter, to the past of theater, but also a sort of exercise of memory in a theater in ruins, as if things are soon to be over and we have to use the last minutes of memory to remember everything.
No, well, really, thank you for sharing. I'm sure you had to tell it so many times, but we haven't seen it in the US. And I think that idea of theater as a theme of itself, the idea of a complex story, dramaturgically dense, written in collaboration, and that is theatrical, but then also that simple stage design, from what I could see, just the chair or table or a background, where actually the play also happens in the mind of the audience. It's not that what we see so often here is still, the realistic representation of a living where everything could be filmed for TV. And so it is quite a poetic combination, what you found. And do you think we call it TAC, for the time after COVID, will you find an adaptation for this? Will you think it will be smaller spaces, bigger spaces? Do you think I want to get back in the big city? Is you going to go outside the building? Are there things where you detect a change in the way Portugal or Lisbon will present theater to the people?
Well, I think a few things are changing, but the real changes are still happening. So what I mean is that I was faced a lot with the question, either by journalists or colleagues during the confinement, and even now, how do you think this changes theater? And well, what my prophecies are quite useless. I could share them, but they're useless, because we will only really be able to think about that when we are back doing theater, because we cannot imagine this change without an audience. We have to imagine it in theater. And that's, for me, one of the huge differences with the performing arts and other arts, is that I think the huge change in visual arts will already be operating right now, in literature for sure, But in the performing arts, it will have to be invented still when we can share with an audience, however, a space. And for a while, we will be reinventing this connection. One thing I realized is that people, at least right now, they're eager to be sharing a physical space. However, however strange the mask and the distance, which are imperative, might feel. However, we miss the freedom of connection that we are used to in a theater building. I think people are valuing a lot the physical presence in the same space. That's something I witnessed already as an actor sharing a theater venue with an audience. There's this sort of militant excitement of being there, as if being there is already an artistic political event, which I think always was, but right now it's underlined. I don't know how long this boost of energy will last, but I think it will last for a while. As long as it's difficult to be together, we will appreciate being together. On the other hand, I think that theaters, directors, producers, we're all thinking differently, in the sense that we always think of a plan B. So before we had plan A, and it could go well or bad. It could be a success or not, appreciated or not, good reviews or not, a happy artistic working process or not. And right now it might not happen, and you need a plan B. What will happen if you can't do it? How will you do it if you can't do it? So it's this interesting thing of, if you can't do what you're planning, how will you do it anyway? And I think we're becoming a plan B species. Maybe again, we always were. I mean, the ability to adapt of the human being is almost limitless. But now it's from the root. Whenever we have an idea, we start immediately working in the plan B for that idea. And this I find, I must say, interesting, because sometimes the plan B is better than plan A. And so I think, of course, open air performance, small audiences, site specific, they will gain a new meaning now. And I think they might become even more mainstream than before. I think we will have more big venue artists considering site-specific circuits and other formats for their work. I was raised in the lack of conditions to work, so I'm very much passionate about big buildings and big stages, because for a long time I could not work in those. So as long as if I can keep on working in big buildings, I'm happy to do that. But I'm also, I mean, I did pieces in facades of buildings, in gardens, in warehouses, and I'm happy to go back to those places or find new places if they allow me to do theater. I think I think it's the range of options is as wide as always, but I think more people are considering more artistic options and frames where to build their performances than before, because they were forced to. Let's say that right now it's harder to be a typical Italian theater director or a typical site-specific director, or I think people will consider more options right now and won't let architecture condition so much what their artistic style or options or aesthetics or ethics are.
So they will be, like Isaiah Berlin said, more like rabbits running over the field in different places, and the hedgehog who goes very deep down into one thing. What's your idea about the digital Zoom for the
Isaiah Berlin, in that Isaiah Berlin comparison of the hedgehog and the fox? I was always for the fox.
Always for the fox.
Yeah, I think theater people are foxes in general. I think people who write 1,000 pages novels like James Joyce or David Foster Wallace, they're the hedgehogs. We work for, a couple of months, if we're lucky, if we have that time in a performance, which we will perform as much as possible while we create the next one. So I think in theater, we're pretty much foxes.
We are foxes, yeah, not rabbits, you're right. And but the digital world, as I say, now we have the children of the digital age and no longer the technological one. What do you think about screen and performance? Computers, laptops, projections at home?
I think, that's a difficult question, Frank, because I've been dealing a lot with screen, of course, as many of us. I think all over the world, in Portugal, I could witness it also. When the confinement started for many of us, performing arts artists, theater artists jumped in their computers and kept on trying. I think most of this trying has a very, common, banal, maybe even artistic result, but it comes from something which I think is very beautiful, which is this sort of immediate response, an attempt. And I'm a big fan of imperfect attempts. I like, drawings with pencil better than the huge painting already produced after years. The drawing, it has this unperfectness, this roughness of life, of theater, of the attempt. I'm always more seduced by it as a spectator, but also as an artist, than by the perfect, sublime sometimes, but perfect obedience to the perfect way to do it. I think theater allows for mistake every time it happens, and trying to hide the potential of mistake is not the most interesting thing. I think the interesting thing is always remind ourselves that the mistake is there, and probably we did it already or we'll do it in the next minute of performance. So this danger is what I'm very seduced about in theater and the performing arts. So I think somehow, although most of my work is also pretty much based and pointing with a big neon flashlight arrow to physical presence in the same space, I find that paramount for my work. I was also very surprised with very interesting things that emerged from the huge sort of avalanche of digital online attempts that we saw during the confinement. But I think we cannot confound, we cannot mix up, serious artistic researches with digital tools, with the sort of desperate, beautiful, crazy, maybe very fragile, precarious attempt of some artists that's closed at home and takes, a skull and goes for a Shakespearean monologue online on Zoom, with all his books and things behind him. So I think there are very good ideas that were already being developed in the border between theater and digital arts and online platforms before the pandemics. I think they will evolve more urgently now, and I think a lot of artists, like with the spaces where to present, will turn their attention to digital tools, while before they didn't feel that need. I think means of production and historical context always pushes us into creative solutions. So if now digital might be a lifesaver, for sure, more artists will turn to it. I must confess personally, although I understand that, I'm less and less interested in digital possibilities for my work. I'm very interested, for instance, in the problem of very little audience. This I like very much. If you want to do physical share of same space, you will have to work for 20, 30 people. I want to explore that potential more than going digital and having the possibility of a very democratic, across the board, 5,000 people all over the world watching my work. It's not a political thing. I really admire people who tend to digital and feel that they're free to do their work. It's just not exciting me. It's like I mean, I love Beckett, but I'm not excited into performing or staging Beckett. And I also love Racine, and Racine really excites me and makes me want to go on stage. So that's what I have with online or a very small basement. If you give me the choice, I will always prefer the small basement for 10 people or an apartment or a kitchen than going online. Although, for instance, Forced Entertainment from the UK, they've been doing beautiful, amazing stuff online, great performances online. The Dutch company Cassis, they're doing beautiful things online. I'm sure that we mentioned Milo Rao earlier. I'm sure that Milo will be able to do great things online, but also open air. Or I think that many artists will inaugurate experiences because of the risk of not being able to be in a theater venue. So I think there's a lot of people thinking of that. But it's true that if we're going online, we have to wish to go online, and that's the thing. We can't be online out of trends or just the need to express ourselves. You can do that a couple of times, but if you want to use the digital tools seriously, you have to desire to be online. And I'm very happy to be online now with you, for instance. But if I'm fantasizing about a piece, I'm always fantasizing about unknown people in the same room while we try to do theater.
And we're coming a bit close to the end, but I would like to know then from you, we say this is not what inspired me, but what is theater good for? What do you think about theater? What does it do? Why do we need it? What is it all about?
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, this is like a commonplace. Don't take me wrong. I'm trying to be to be pretentious, but I think theater is, period. So I understand the problem of trying to understand what is it good for, but that's not a problem for theater. So I think I can answer that question from the point of view of someone who loves theater and who sees a point in it. But as an artist, I don't think I have to justify why theater is good for. I'm just doing theater. If you come and watch it and you're sort of occupied with this question, what is it good for? Then it's your question. For me, as a spectator, as a citizen, or even as an artist, I'm very touched by the human assembly in it. I'm the fact that we're together in the same space, and that we're facing somehow a mystery, which I think a work of art always is. But it's a mystery that we have to, take part in as a spectator as much as the artists on stage. We have to sort of contribute with our presence for the mystery to exist. I find this very powerful. It's something that really changed my life. The fact that I saw theater, it made me closer to to humankind. The fact that I could share this space. On the other hand, I don't think that theater itself is a political tool, although it's a political space. But I think it's a sort of anti-chamber, a sort of hall towards politics and action and change. I don't think that it's within the piece that change happens, but I believe that a piece can lead to even, very microscopic changes in the world. And when they happen, and when you witness them happening, even however small they are, for me, it's I could work in theater for 50 years of my life, if I would be sure that one of these microscopic changes would take place. So in that sense, the idea that you do this useless thing, apparently useless, and that change happens, however small, but that does happen because of this useless thing, I find incredible. It's like smiling and suddenly something changed. I find this very strong. There's this beautiful story about Russian poet Anna Akhmatova. She was her husband had been shot by the Stalinist regime, and her son had been arrested, and he was sort of a teenager. He was 17 or something, and she tried to visit him every day in prison, but not always succeeded, because very long lines of thousands of women. Anna Akhmatova called them the 3,000 women lines, because they were so long. And one day she was in a line. Actually, she wrote this at the end of the day. And so, beginning of quote, I was in one of these 3,000 women line. Everybody was whispering. None of us would talk loud in one of these lines. Suddenly, someone whispered, "That's the poet Anna Akhmatova." A woman came to me, and clearly she didn't know who I was, but she asked me, will you describe what we're living here in one of your poems? And I answered, yes, I will. And then a smile appeared in what once was a face. End of quote. This idea that a poet promises a poem and a smile appears in what once was a face. For me, Anna Akhmatova could stop her amazing body of work in poetry that day with this little story. So I'm inspired by the possibility of change and the usefulness of what apparently is useless, and the power of what's invisible, and the strength of mystery. And also the fact that it's such fun to do theater. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the philosopher, he hated theater. He thought it was superfluous, but he wrote in a famous letter to d'Alembert, one of the authors of the Encyclopedia with Diderot. Rousseau writes that although it has all the vices in the world, or the problems, all the hateful things and vain things of theater, I have to admit it has one big advantage. It's a civic party. It is a party, which I hate, but it's a civic party. And this idea that this sort of political and playful moment that theater might be, this human assembly, very Greek, very Athens, the party mixed with politics, is for me, it's I think it's still what I look for when I do a piece, trying to mix the politics with the party.
Amazing, yeah. This is all the P's, like Portugal, right? Poetry, politics, and the party. That's
I'm going to use that.
And the prompter with a P. Yeah, that is amazing. And yeah, so we will. So you think you will go back to tomorrow? If this is now over today, tomorrow you will make new plans again, how to rehearse, how to get back with your theater, how people.
Absolutely, everything's. Yeah. One thing we were talking about that during the rehearsals of Catarina and the Beauty of Killing Fascists the other day, which is sometimes, artists that work with me are actors, and especially set designers and light designers and costume designers. They go a bit, they stress a bit with my ability to procrastinate. So I deeply believe that you should never take a creative decision unless you really have to. So unless you're way beyond the deadline, you should never take the decision. Oh, what lights, this or this? Can we still wait until tomorrow? Yes, but it will be late, but we can wait, then tomorrow. So I always do this. And I always say, this is about the research and the experience. I'm not really into the business of making the right choice. I'm in the business of living the dilemma. And sometimes, if you let a problem alone enough time, someone will solve it for you. The collective will solve it for you. So right now we have a text in this piece, which is very controversial because it's a fragment. I wrote a sort of fascist speech for a character, but it's a long speech and it's really fascist. I mean, I did my research, and it's this sort of, the idea was to uncover the fascism within the populist speeches. So I was inspired. I saw like dozens of speeches by Trump, Bolsonaro, Viktor Orban from Hungary, Salvini in Italy, Marine Le Pen in France, Portuguese extreme right wing, which I will not name because I don't think they deserve yet to be named. And I tried to mix all this and make this sort of perfect fascist speech, but not really fascist because it's fascist under the veil of populism. And when we read it, the actors were really shocked. And some of them were like, I'm not sure I can do a performance where this text is. And I said like, yeah, but you could do a performance where someone would historically say, a Nazi speech, as long as if it's clear that the play is anti-Nazi. Well, clearly, but here, this is so today and it's so dangerous because people are appealed by this speech. And I said like, yeah, but the people had the same appeal for Hitler. So we have to deal with this. And we were discussing it a lot. And now we still don't know if it will be in the play, and people are getting very nervous about it. There probably some of them are listening to our conversation. And they're very nervous about it. Will it be on the piece? Won't it be? And of course, for me, it's always a collective decision. I won't have text in the piece that actors do not engage with. So we're debating about this, but I'm just postponing as much as possible because it's not so much that the text will be there, but the dilemma that we're living now. What can you do? How far can you go as an author or as a collective of artists taking such speech on stage for such a long time? When it comes to extreme right wing, we're only used to the sound bites, but we don't spend half an hour listening to them. Well, I did, and it's really very efficient what they do. Half an hour of one of these populists talking can really convince you. And of course, I always think that the audience is as smart or smarter than me. So I think we can expose them to this. Because I exposed myself and I was not converted. I just appreciate the efficiency and the ability of the rhetorics, even when they're not very good, even when they're not eloquent, they're amazing. I mean, Trump is a good example. He's really not eloquent, but he's so efficient. He's amazing. His performance is crazy.
Like the Leni Riefenstahl films are incredibly effective, and we have to admire it. Listen,
but I was telling you, just to finish, one of the things people were very stressed with was this my sort of tranquility towards time being passing and not taking decisions. And I always say this is about the experience. Let's leave the problem. Let's not find the solution too soon, because I mean, when it comes to the arts, the solution sometimes it's just like the extreme end of the problem, and then you show the problem to the audience instead of solving it and hiding it. And now with the pandemics, everything is so uncertain that all the actors are like, when I say like, let's not decide yet if we have this speech or not, we'll see later, we still have time, we always have time. Even after the opening of the show, we can change stuff. And actors are really like, yeah, of course, this is just about the process. It's not about the result. Let's live the problem. And I think a lot of people lost their obsession with the efficiency and production, at least in the arts, in the context where I deal with, because of these pandemics. They sort of accepted that we have to, seize the moment when it comes to creation. We have to live today's problem and believe that it's in us, in our skills, in our technical skills, in our creativity, that a work of art will emerge that will translate this problem instead of solving it way too early and hiding it from the audience. So time, the feeling of time, I think, the use of time, I think it changed for many artists, at least those who surround me. I really feel that. I feel more company in the frame of mind of, let's just live the problem. And, art is about translating our problems, not about solving them.
Yeah, actors and directors, in a way, they are translators of great text. And it's great, yeah, what might change. And someone said at Kemi here in New York from the Laundromat Project, I collaborated, we do all this, but now we say, hey, how are you? On the same time, which we didn't ask before. Nobody did. It was changing. We are so close to it. I mean, we're a bit over time, but that was so significant what you had to say. If there's something for young artists or the young Tiago who is starting out and just creating his company, what do you say to artists now? What should they do? Or to our listeners, use that time? What do you think is of essence? What's essential?
The attempt. Just don't wait for the big canvas and the big opportunity and having all the different colors in your palette and being able to draw perfectly. Just do 100 drawings in a napkin. Just go for it. Take a broken pencil from the floor that someone forgot and do your thing. So I think in theater this means find the text, learn it by heart during the evening, and just go for it. And find someone's kitchen where you can present your work to 3 people. But don't wait for the big canvas to be ready don't wait for invitations. Just take whatever you have around you, and if you feel the urge and the desire, just practice. Do as much as possible. It has nothing to do with the present time. It's the only thing that I always learned. You should fail as much as possible, and just it sounds like a Nike commercial. Just do it. But Nike stole it from artists and revolutionaries. It's you should accept how imperfect our attempts at art are. We will never touch the heights of Sophocles. We will never touch the heights of Shakespeare or Racine, and that's liberating. We will only be noise. We will surely only be noise, and for a very short time. So let's profit from the party and the civic side of it, and do a political party, noisy one, and not wait for posterity or to be legitimized by critics or massive audiences. Just take all the napkins, all the butts of pencils that you can use, and keep on drawing your little attempts, be it in theater, literature, film, and things will follow or not.
That's a significant, great series and deep advice. So the broken pencil idea, I like that, instead of this broken window thing. What police people say, you have one broken window, the neighborhood goes down. They say, someone will go in, someone will break, then drugs, the neighbors will sell the house. But you say, take a broken pencil, and everything will change. It's true. I like very much what you said for your rehearsals, to say, live the experience. don't have the immediate solution. And this is what we have now also. I think this is a time when you're right. We have to live this experience where we are in now, and it's a time where we look for change. We have to change authentically, but also, be ready, or as you said, that chamber before the change and the activism. Maybe that is a great description.
Yeah, I mean,
incubation period. I think Susanna Kennedy talked about that. That it's something where something incubates and shows it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of us don't create much. So I think we have to accept that, and know that if you're moved by desire and urgency, then you will, like Rilke said to the young poets, you will write. You don't need my approval to do so. If you can live without writing, then quit. But if you need writing poems to live, it won't be me, Rilke, or you, Frank, or any other person that will stop an artist with its urgency and desire. However bad an artist he or she might be, they won't be stopped by our warnings. So just go for it, because I did lousy pieces of theater in my life, really things that I'm ashamed. I'm very honest, and now I'm a bit better. So not all of us can be like Anne Teresa de Kesmarker and do historical play at the age of 23 with the Rosas Dances Rosas and change the landscape of global contemporary dance. Very few artists are that amazing and such genius at such young age and throughout their lives, like Anne Teresa always was with dance. Most of us are not that great, and some of us get a little bit better with time. But if you have the urge and the desire, just make some noise.
It's like, I think it's that Fernando Pessoa poem a friend once sent me about the three things. There's always a beginning, as about certainty. There's a beginning, a certainty. You have to go further, and a certainty that you will be interrupted. You will not finish it, and then you have to make something out of it in the later part of it. Really, really, really thank you. This was a really significant contribution. It's for us also important to hear you as a European theater artist and the way you think and connect, and the poetry, the literature, the art world. So this is a great reminder about what theater really in a way is about or can do. And we hope one day you will come to New York, stay in touch, and do the good work. And really, that was a significant contribution. And I hope for our listeners, and thank you for taking a time. We went a little bit over time, but it's really worth it. There might be something that changes your life, or what Tiago told about that little change. What he said was very significant also for our lives, and to take action and to maybe see theater as a chamber where you as audience members think about and make connection, and then you create something. It's not about the theater, it's about what you see and how you connect it to your life, and hopefully contribute to a change. It's a stunning work you're doing. Really, congratulations, and thank you for sharing. Tomorrow we have Caridad Switch with us. She will talk about the Latina community here in New York City. She's a playwright, translator, essayist, and has a watch that has also created many symposia and convened since many what's the right word, gatherings of artists, and where we now struggle with, and we have to all pay more attention of the Black Lives Matter, and that all communities of colors need more attention. And we really look forward to hear what Caridad will have to say. So thank you for joining us all. Thanks for HowlRound for hosting us again. Vijay and Thea and Travis, Segal team is Andy and Sanyang and Tiago. I hope, so lucky us we had you, that you didn't have to go back to the theater today. So we were happy to have you on the last day of lockdown, and really thank you. I can really only imagine how busy you are, and so it's a big compliment that that you took the time. So
it was a big pleasure. Thank you so much, Frank, and thank you to everyone watching. And hopefully we'll be able to meet again and exchange ideas and cross our paths in the future, and hopefully in person.
In safer times. Okay, thank you, Tiago. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.